and reviewing the youth count planning effort that we're working on. I think Kathy, did you just join us, Kathy?
I did. I was sitting in some other meeting waiting for it to start. I think Julie was over there too.
Okay. So Kathy, I just jumped in a little bit, but I'll turn the mic over to you.
I'm glad you did, Peter. Thank you. Sorry, everybody. Like I said, I was in some Zoom meeting waiting for it to start, just apparently not the right Zoom meeting. I'm Kathy Barco, and I am one of the project managers with the Youth Count in Alameda County. Peter, I presume you've already introduced yourself.
Just a little bit, but yeah, good enough.
And also joining us from Applied Survey Research will be Julie Burr. We'll make sure she says hi when she gets on. She was hanging out in the other Zoom link with me. And we are part of a team that has really been working on this youth count for a while and have seen many of you in our previous meetings regarding youth count as well. So nice to have you back. We are going to build from what we have done in that previous youth count planning meeting and expand on that in today's conversations. The work for the homeless count is a collaborative effort with the County Housing and Community Development Department, the County Office of Homeless Care and Coordination, Aspire Consulting, my organization, Applied Survey Research, where Peter and Julie work for, and also Everyone Home. And I would like to turn the floor over to Katie for an opportunity to introduce herself.
Thanks so much, Kathy. Hi, everyone. I am Katie Gabriel, the Director of Research and Data Analytics for Everyone Home, and so grateful to come here today. And I'm a little concerned about there being 2 Zoom links here, so I'm just doing some investigating on the back end over here, Kathy.
Katie, it was from our save the one that you had sent to our internal planning team. So I'm not sure that it went out to the broader group who RSVP'd. It was from the original links that you sent when we were saving these dates back in August, whatever.
That's what you clicked, Kathy?
Yes.
Oh, because that's what I just sent to you, so now I'm not sure.
I've had a Murphy's Law kind of a day today, so
okay.
We have just may be continuing. The count is taking place this year, January 25th. And so save the date, mark your calendar. We need all hands on deck for the effort for this count. And especially, and we think about kind of the effort for the youth count, wanting to make sure that we've got all of the youth providers really plugged in and in places where you all can contribute to our counting efforts to make sure that we have as extensive and accurate of a count of both unaccompanied minors and transitional age youth, age 14, up to age 24, 18 to 24, and making sure that we get all of those folks counted as well. We have been deeply mired in homeless count planning, at least on our end, since about August, September. And then in October, we launched our community-wide planning meetings. And right now we are at the point where we are kind of operating on several tracks. We are working with our city and regional representatives and outreach teams on our general count track. We'll be working with our HMIS staff on the sheltered count track. And really today's meeting is youth count. We booked these community planning meetings months ago, a couple of months ago by now. So we are scheduled to go until 4 o'clock today, but I do not think that we will need the full time. So we may be able to give you all some time back in your day. For those of you that are familiar with the count, we have these 3 components of the count: sheltered, our visual count, and our survey. And all 3 of those components really have their own lane of youth focus in there. For the sheltered count, we do include all of the youth shelters and transitional housing programs, as well as making sure that we are counting and identifying all of the youth and young adults that are staying in the adult aged shelters throughout the county, so that we can report on them as being a transitional age youth when we are doing our reporting to HUD. On our visual count, when we go out in the morning, our teams are counting everyone that they see, and we know that we will capture some youth and young adults in that visual count that goes out in the morning. And then in addition, we have this separate and augmenting outreach effort that we do generally in the afternoon and the evenings. At least that's when we did it in 2019, to really have this extra effort of making sure that our youth and young adults are included, and making sure that we have undergone some extra steps in order to get that population
Alert from
included in
backup
our
not
count.
completed.
Following our sheltered and visual count, we also have our survey work that is conducted immediately following the count. And in that, we do a random sample for both sheltered and unsheltered. And we love having youth guides act as peer surveyors in that as well, to make sure that we have both the means of accessing the unsheltered youth, as well as our youth sheltered programs participating in the random selection of surveys. So lots of places where we're threading all of that together. We are required to report to HUD very specific tables about youth and young adults and parenting youth, where you have an 18 to 24-year-old who is not in a household with another adult over the age of 24 and has their own children. So we really are doing a lot of work on the back end to make sure that we're as thorough in this count as possible, as it's one of the very specific reporting requirements that HUD has. And then this is the last slide that I'm going to share with you a little bit. Just a lot of stuff moving and going on right now. We are really in the depths of everything homeless count at the moment. And so on the left side of the screen in the table, you see some of the things that are really going on right now. We are working with our outreach teams in other areas where we know we're going to have special teams that are going out because of the terrain or safety or access issues out in the hills, getting that worked on. We are also finalizing our survey, and that will be available soon for public comment. And then later on this month, you can expect to see our general volunteer sign-up link be broadly publicized. And we are working with our jurisdictions who want a city-specific report. A whole slew of things are going to be happening in January. Everything from guide recruitment, training for our guides, training for volunteers. We'll be launching an additional piece for unsheltered families, and really just making sure that we have all of our census tracts covered for both the youth count and for our general count. So all of that homework really is going to be happening in January. New this year, we are going to be distributing our maps and our count materials in advance of the day of the count. So that information will be distributed electronically. As people are signing up for the count, that's how we will be getting their contact information and then using that as the communication mode to send out information in advance. On the youth count side, when we met last, we had decided that, yes, we would like some come and be counted sites where our young adults who are accessing a variety of kinds of services can be counted at those particular day sites. These could be anything from like youth uprising, some drop-in centers, some places where young adults go, even if they aren't homeless, really just thinking about where are all of the places that we know youth who may be homeless may also be accessing other services, and creating a portal where they can easily make sure that they are counted on that night if they were unsheltered in the prior evening. We also decided we will be working with that targeted youth count as well, and that will take place on the 25th. And those two strategies are were kind of heavily endorsed by the group that met here last month, and people were pretty excited about launching those two pieces about the homeless count. There are still several other pieces that we would need to put into place in order to do a good homeless count, and other discussions that we want to have with you all and youth as youth providers to help us really think through and make sure that our methodology matches how we know youth and young adults experience homelessness in Alameda County, so that we've got this right fit of a good methodology that meets people where they're at and meets their needs, so that they can be counted as part of this effort. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Peter to kick off this discussion with us and help get our brains thinking about what are the next pieces that our methodology experts at ASR would like some input around for Alameda County to help us finalize our planning efforts. Peter.
Thank you, Kathy. Want to advance the slide for us, Kathy? So just to kind of embellish a little bit and recap what Kathy was saying, our 2022 youth count goals are to really better represent the under 25 unaccompanied youth experience in the PIT count. Also to just better understand the unstably housed youth experience. Supplement the general count, supplement / complement the general youth count in efforts that we do, especially documenting TAY youth, and which is the majority location of where we find most of our youth that we report to HUD. It's really in that TAY range of 18 through 24 that are observed during the general count and the canvassing we do in support of that. And one of our big goals this year, and we suggested it a little bit in our last meeting, is to do whatever we can to improve our 2019 youth count effort. And in general, what we are observing, and ASR has been an advocate of dedicated youth counts for many years, but we feel that we still don't effectively profile the youth count, the unaccompanied youth experience very well, in large part because of the definition that we have to work with HUD being so narrow, in that it's a one night only. It excludes motel, hotel, it excludes double ups. And those three things alone tend to suppress the overall number, because the youth housing experience is one of great variety, as you all know. And if you don't, profile their street status on the night of the count, they're not included in the report to HUD, even though 4, 5, 6 days a week, they might be in a literally unsheltered status. So the historical way for us has been to basically do what we're trying, our starting point again this year, which as Kathy outlined earlier, is the come and be counted sites, and then the dedicated youth teams that go out to hotspots. And then integrated into that is an effort to do a pre-screening tool to determine whether or not folks are eligible to be included in the count. And frankly, in 2019, we weren't super happy with what we came up with. We did in 2019, for those of you who were part of it, we had a hotspot process where we set up, we facilitated focus groups, for lack of a better description, and we had youth tell us where the high profile unaccompanied youth spots would be throughout the county. And then we organized youth only teams, organizations like Covenant, for example, who had a staffer shuttle folks around to those hotspots. And when they arrived there, they administered a screening tool to determine if they were HUD eligible. And they filled out that screening tool and for later review on whether they were included in the count or not. So just to give a little summary of that 2019 effort, we had about 200 screening results. 10% were at 25 years of age exactly, and were actually excluded from the count because you have to be under 25. 7.5% were over 25, which is, again, excludes them from the youth count. 18% stated that they stayed with their friend or other family member at their location, which excluded them from the count because they're considered by HUD to be sheltered. And then 55% stayed in their own home or apartment, and all, by definition there were not eligible for the count. So out of that 200, a really small number were reportable by HUD and living in a vehicle or a place considered by the narrow definition of HUD to be homeless. So we don't really feel great about that approach, and would like to see what we could do on this call to potentially suggest some other supplemental approaches. You want to forward the slide? So I wanted to first off see from the group any thoughts you had that might supplement what we are currently planning that might help us out in getting a better sense of the number. I do want to say that we're working in other counties, and one of the feedbacks we're getting is that because of a lot of different reasons, the youth are very commonly commingling with the general population now more than they historically have, and that there's not as much segregation as maybe there was 4 to 6 years ago because of declining areas to go and maybe other reasons. So that some of our advocates are telling us that where you're going to find youth is where you're going to find the general homeless population, albeit maybe in different parts of an encampment, but still in that same encampment area. So what we wanted to ask on this call, for those of you that work in this arena, if you have any other approaches that might work. The only other approach that we're looking to experiment with in the family homelessness arena is out calling. And if you have lists or text numbers, or that's a regular communication plan for you with folks in your program or affiliated with your organization, is there a way for us to determine, where they might be, staying on the night of the 24th that could potentially be considered HUD eligible and therefore included in the count? And then we would have to put that through a deduplication process, but potentially that might be a way to better measure the prevalence of youth homelessness. But I wanted to pause for a minute and get comments from folks right now. If you had any thoughts on this and what might work more effectively, and does that comment from some sister counties that there's a lot more commingling now than before, does that resonate in Alameda, or what are you telling? One of the things overarching for us in this discussion is that we can take some skills and ideas that we've learned elsewhere, but it's more effective when when you tell us what's going to work for your county. And I'll open the floor to any ideas, thoughts, or comments that folks on the call may have relative to that. Anybody? Anybody agree with a commingling comment? Deidre?
Well, I would like for BYA, Berkeley Youth Alternatives, to maybe be considered as a come and be counted site, because our youth population may know others who are homeless, and maybe they can come in and be counted.
Okay.
Well, I would volunteer BYA for that purpose.
All right, that's great. Yeah, we've discussed that, and we have some pretty straightforward opportunities to set up sites as come and be counted. The marketing for that, would have to be kind of from your organization to recruit the youth to come on the 25th and fill out the screener, but your site would be perfect for it, and I don't see any issue with that at all.
Well, I would like to know who to contact, and I guess we could create flyers to start out in January that this is coming up.
Okay, well, you've contacted the right people already, and we'll talk a little bit post meeting about what the details will be.
Okay.
And Deidre, we would like to support you in that. We don't expect you to be necessarily creating flyers. Perhaps that's something we can take on and then distribute out to you, that you can just post them as well. You're going to be doing a lot in terms of like individual conversations and reminders to youth to remember to show up and remember to be here on that day. We can only do that for the day of the count, that Tuesday, January 25th. So we know you and all of the come and be counted sites will have a lot of reminders to be able to do to get people to plug in. But in terms of communication materials, I think that's something that we can assist with and support you as best we can in that too.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Philip asked a great question, which was, what about high school participation? And just the short answer is we welcome that. The longer answer to that is that we've really found it challenging to get school districts to do a lot of work with their homeless students, because HUD requires that their housing status on the night of the 24th be confirmed. And the McKinney-Vento reporting is a fall report, which goes to the State Department of Ed via their CalPADS home McKinney-Vento report. And that fall reporting does not suffice for the January PIT reporting that we have. So anybody that we report from a McKinney-Vento source has to be verified for the night of the 24th. And the process of verification really requires somebody from the school district to call those families or those children and find out what their housing status was for the 24th. And then we have, if any district is willing to do that, we have materials to support that. We have a whole data entry form on that. But almost universally right now, Philip, we're getting the timeout sign by any McKinney-Vento people, and you're saying we're totally overwhelmed with short-staffed and other responsibilities related to COVID, and you're asking for a huge task which we can't do. But
Can I ask a follow-up?
yeah,
What about junior colleges, community colleges? Is that the same kind of issue with like district stuff?
generally, yeah. Where we've been more successful though, Philip, is sometimes community colleges or universities have like a housing liaison, or there's some associations for some, loose associations for some unsheltered students. And we've been able to, get some reporting from some of those groups on a less formal manner. So that's a possibility. Through the administration of those schools, we have not been successful. But if anyone on the call has inroads into that, we're very interested. The phenomena of homeless secondary education is just huge right now, and we just don't have a great window to it.
I was just on. I'm a community member. I was just at a meeting with the Schoolhouse Connection, I think it was, last weekend. That was the topic of conversation, the homeless count. And I was wondering, with Schoolhouse Connections, Ed Data, those sort of organizations, they don't have any access to data on students.
They have the student records are private, and the communications, are typically not shared with any outside agency. Every district that's been able to cooperate with us in the past has had to do it from internal staff that they have, where there's the confidentiality protocols in place.
I see.
But it's a great idea, and I like the way you're thinking, but we haven't been successful yet.
Well, it seems like for next year, maybe, like they have HIPAA, the portability.
Yes.
So maybe thinking forward for next year, maybe something like that can begin to be drafted with the social services or health and human services, so that next year you'll be able to coordinate with all of these organizations in order to develop something so that you can gather the information. Because this year is sort of like a pass, it's done.
Yeah.
But for next year.
It's a good idea. It's the whole privacy stuff is a real can of worms, but it's a great idea.
And so, even with the applications, how they're talking about conversation has not been to not re-traumatize people when people have gone through situations. And so the applications are now sort of interlinked so that different agencies can get it. So maybe a category can be added specifically for that. And anyway, I'm just thinking out loud.
That's what this part of the call is all about, is getting creative, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts at all from anybody on a better way? do people agree that maybe a lot of unaccompanied youth are integrated with the general population now, or is that what's going on in Alameda County, or
Well, adults have,
no?
there's more information about access for resources for adults. When you look for youth, you don't see quite the same number. And so, of course, when you reach a certain age, you're going to go where your resources are at.
Yeah,
And so, why would you stay in this little group over here if they don't have what you need? You need,
yeah,
whatever it is that you need.
right.
And so maybe even at the adult resource centers, that might be something that I don't know if you guys thought that, about noting somewhere for the adults that get resources, is it noted that anyone coming in under this certain age group, can you participate in this? I don't know if that's what you guys do.
Yeah, well, we have a little bit of information if they process through an HMIS or a coordinated entry system. But unfortunately, we don't necessarily know what their status is on a particular day, which is what this whole project requires, that you determine what's happening on a given day. In this case, the future of January 24th of next year.
So just a snapshot of that 124-hour.
Yeah, that's what it is. Exactly. It's
Mhm.
a picture. And this whole thing is being done throughout the whole country. And then all of those pictures get weaved together for a report to Congress. That's what this whole effort that we do is.
So much of the numbers are being understated because you're not actually getting a true count.
Well, in my opinion, that with youth, the undercount is really based on this, double up situation and staying with friends or other contacts, and that many of the youth are just moving from place to place. And, we don't necessarily, capture them with the point in time count net, because they're according to HUD, they're commonly in a literal double up situation, which by many definitions excludes them from being counted. Sometimes there's a hotel, they pool together some money and will stay in a hotel motel. If that motel hotel that they're pooling together and staying in is not paid for by a program voucher, they're excluded from the count as well. So there's some
A lot of limitations.
there's a lot of bureaucratic, constrictions on it, which don't reflect the youth experience very well,
Wow.
which is unfortunate, but we gotta
You got to deal with the reality.
Yeah. Any other ideas on strategies that we might improve upon? Does anybody have any like wait lists or lists that texting or phone calling to see where youth may be staying on the night of the 24th that might help us better profile? Is that a possibility, or?
Well, I certainly will be talking with my coworkers. We're going on Christmas break for the next 2 weeks, but about the youth that they individually are working with. So I'll try to get more active that way.
Okay, well, I don't want to stop this, and we'll give you another chance toward the end of the presentation here to weigh in on something if something comes to your mind. Kathy, do you want to show the last slide here
Sure.
for me? So we talked a little bit about this, the recruiting participation of additional youth agencies. We did a pretty good poll and asked people if there are other youth serving agencies who we should add in our planning to, hit the streets, or like BYA be, a come and be counted site. So just add those names into the chat as you see them. And then the next area that I wanted to talk about here and show was the hotspot identification tool we have. And this is something that we did last year, where we convened a hotspot planning tool where we went to several youth organizations throughout the county, convened a little focus group of youth, and those youth were paid, by the hour to help us. And they identified spots that throughout the county where unaccompanied youth would congregate, so that on the afternoon of the 25th, when we sent our teams out, we would go to primarily these hotspot locations. And for this year, with the COVID and the theme word being virtual, we have an online version of this process that I want to show you right now, and I will pull this up as we talk about it. And this is a youth hotspot identification screen that we'll send you all a link to, and it's a way for you to convene a group, or through your own outreach efforts, to literally drop a pin, and I'll give you a demo of the process, but drop a pin on a location that you feel that our team should go and attempt an enumeration of unaccompanied youth. So the first thing you do is you would enter in and choose the county you want to work in this case, Alameda. And then you would hit, so you have the general outline of the county. And then your next step would be to submit a report on where we should go to enumerate unaccompanied homeless youth. So you would, on the bottom screen here, hit submit a report. And then you just follow your cursor, and you can zoom in if you like and get in as tight as you want. And it gives you street detail. So here's here's an example of, Hagenberger and International. And you would just put your double click on your pin. And let's say through your youth, you thought there were, 4 people that regularly hung out there. You would type in and then type in 4 and then hit report it. And then it, as you can see here, it enables you to move on to the next reporting that you have to do. Now, let's say that, does anyone want to shout out a cross street here? Let's say San Pablo and what? What would an intersection be? San Pablo and the Trinity. Oh, that's not where we want to go.
Maybe West San Pablo and West Grand. I think they intersect.
Okay, there you go. Not seeing the. Well, I think I've zoomed in I've zoomed in the wrong place. But
You could follow San Pablo.
yeah. Well, anyway, I guess I've gone too far here, but you can kind of play with this, but you can, using the location map, you can kind of, you can dial in to a particular area. And again, you would just, put a pin on there, number of people, maybe one or two, and you would report it and move on. And I wanted to let everybody know that this system here, reporting youth hotspots, we want to maintain the privacy of this hotspot location to make sure that nobody uses it in a way that it's not intended. And the pins that are entered in for a particular day are wiped clean at roughly midnight on midnight the day that they're entered. And all of the entries are saved in a master database, which is protected from other folks. But what we will want you to do, and we'll certainly speak to some of the larger agencies, is to try and get you to access this hotspot identification tool, and then get your youth to participate and play with this map and start to drop pins throughout your neighborhoods and your areas. And then we'll be looking at the concentrations of the pins, and then the individual teams that we put together for the point in time count day on the 25th will use these pins as a starting point to cover as they canvass the entire county. So hopefully this will be a valuable tool, and we'll help you with any support on it if you need. And we'll be sending out this link to everybody after the call, and you can play with it. Any questions on the tool at all before I move on?
You said that the points would be used for the teams going out on the point in time count. Are you referring to the morning count or the evening count, or for both?
No, this is just for the youth count only. The morning count is a complete canvas regardless of a hotspot or not. So we'll be going to all these areas, but the youth count is more targeted and is really been set up to go to youth specific hotspots rather than canvass the entire county.
So we would, for instance, if we had some hotspots in Alameda that were part of a census district, we would note those and then check in with the team to see if they've been counted in the morning.
No,
right.
we do a duplication on that later.
Uh-huh.
We have the profiles from the morning count, and then we capture rough age groups, and then we have a deduplication criteria that we follow, and we'll deduplicate the findings of the youth count to the general count.
So Veronica and others that are involved in the regular city counts in the morning, we are covering all 360 census tracts in the morning count. This is a supplemental piece, and the statisticians will manage all of that deduplication on the back end. So all of the places that these pins are going to be dropped are also the places that we expect youth and young adults to be counted if they're there in the morning. Part of what happens though is that we know that youth aren't necessarily up and around in the morning, in those early morning hours. And so we're trying to also capture them in afternoons and evenings, and then we will deduplicate on the back end. But it is not anything that volunteers or our city regional coordinators need to be concerned about managing that deduplication or messaging anything differently to any of your outreach or volunteer teams.
Great, thanks, that helps.
And then I think we've mentioned this before, but the youth, so when the youth go out on their teams, we will organize what territories they go to, so they're not counting the same areas. Everybody will have a distinct territory that they'll be responsible for reviewing the hotspot areas and anything that may come up on their count. The youth will be paid $20 an hour for their effort. And then we're hoping that youth agency staff will be able to provide them with transportation if necessary. And then, so we'll make those arrangements with those youth agencies outside of this phone call. Any other questions before I show you a sample of the youth screening tool? So as mentioned before, we have a process where we try and determine if the youth that we're observing is qualified for the HUD point in time count reporting. And what we have done is created a supplemental youth screening tool. This is just a draft right now. It's not final. It's a working draft. And this is something that would be filled out at the come and be counted sites and would also be filled out by the respondent that was being queried by the youth teams that went to these hotspot locations. So you can just kind of, I'm not going to spend too much time on here. 3, gender. We're making some changes in this gender vocabulary and questioning. That's definitely going to be changed. This is an old form, but these are some of the questions we asked to determine, eligibility, and the responses were partially disclosed when I showed you some of the percentage categories of the responses. Again, this isn't the full survey, but it's just a screener tool. And as you could tell, of our 200 responses, the majority of respondents were screened out of inclusion, which for us was disappointing, and we want to do better on it. So once we get a little further with this, we'll share it with folks to have another look at, and everyone will obviously get a copy of it before they hit the streets. And we will have an electronic observation tool that's smartphone based that will be used in the field as well. We'll have a paper backup if anyone needs it. And that's our current plan. And as mentioned, we're looking to improve our process in any way we can. I'm a big fan of what we call embedded reporting, which is if there are any large groupings of unaccompanied homeless youth, to have them report into a contact with somebody in our pit world that can tell us how many youth were let's say at an abandoned building or in an encampment that had other unaccompanied youth under 25, and therefore give us a separate reporting that would be a little less stress inducing and intrusive in our data collection effort. I know many of those areas are kind of hard to find, but on the general count, we find that somebody living in encampments is frequently willing to report on the number of persons sleeping in the encampment, which keeps us from having to put a team out there and traipse through an encampment and potentially, have an unsafe encounter, or certainly an encounter that would create additional stress on the residents. Any comments on the screening tool that we're looking at, again, in this draft mode that we currently have? Not seeing any hands or. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When I'm just trying to follow you guys. So let me put this back on. Okay, so when since this is set up by grids, right? And what is that the groups that go out and clean the encampment so they know the numbers? Are you guys work in collaboration with them, because a lot of those encampments are very organized?
Yeah, so this is just to recap, there's really this is a separate component from the general count. So the general count is on the morning of the 25th, and that's with a whole different infrastructure than what we're talking about here. This is just, so there'll be a general count with a lot of outreach workers and lived experience persons, and using the grid that you mentioned, which is a census tract. They'll be going to encampments, they'll be going into neighborhoods, suburbs, all over. And then this is separate from that. And this is where we're really trying to zero in on youth, under 25, and that may have been missed in that general count. And we're trying to, get them included in the count.
Got it.
So that's the difference.
Got it.
I have a question. How would they have been missed in a count? It's just
Well, for example, there's some, as an example, there's some encampments in some locations. You might have an under 25 youth that wouldn't want to go in that encampment because for whatever reason, people in the encampment have a bias toward youth, or the youth get victimized by predators or other things in that encampment, and they just don't want to be around a large older population. So they hang out elsewhere in a place where there may be only people in their same age group, or where they feel safer. So again, that's something that historically we've experienced, and we're hearing now that it's less of a phenomena than it once was, because there's fewer places to go, for one, and B, there's more commingling with youth and adult population. But
okay. Thank you.
that may not be the case.
Another example of that might be that by time a team gets to counting a particular census tract at 6:30, 6:45, and any young adults that were there might already be off to school, in a college building, in somewhere else where they're not counted in that morning count. But in the afternoon, where people don't have as many, afternoon or evening, don't have as many options for places to go or stay or hang out, we're hoping to catch some of them then.
So if you could all kind of chew on this a little bit, my part of the presentation is wrapped up. I'm going to turn the floor back over to Kathy, and I encourage people to, volunteer any thoughts on this or anything that we're missing. We want to do a better job on the youth count, and frankly, don't know how. And are open to strategies that come from you or the youth in your programs. If anybody's got any great suggestions on how to do it, differently and more effectively to represent this phenomena, we want to do it. Many of us in this field know that youth are the most vulnerable, or among the most vulnerable, out on the streets. And if we can intervene while they're still young, the chances of being able to keep their experience of being unstably housed as short as possible. So I'll turn the floor over to Kathy, and thanks very much for your time and interest in this area.
Thank you, Peter. All right, folks, we're going to use the last bit of time on our call today to really kind of hone in a little bit more on some of these topics that you've heard mentioned in Peter's presentation or in mine in other parts of the call. There's just a couple points that I want to reiterate. For those of you that are our city and regional coordinators, we've got Oakland and Alameda in particular in the house right now. This is just supplemental information to the work you all are doing. We are not expecting you all in those coordination roles to pick up any of the additional work for coordinating youth count. We will be coordinating that piece of it all separately. Also want to open the topic about what you all think is the best time to reach youth that may not have a place to go that in those afternoon and evening hours where we can find them out on the streets in the afternoon. Typically, we have worked in the time frame of between 3 and 7 p.m., usually gathering our teams around 3. By the time they get to the hot spots where we know youth are, it's generally about 4-ish. And we stay there anytime from 7, even up until 10 p.m. if the youth think that there is a chance of finding additional unsheltered youth out there. How does that time frame land with you all, that kind of 4 to 7 or 4 to 10 time slot?
It sounds good to me as far as the youth that we know of. We're trying to figure out whether they're unhoused or not, but the folks that we know of are out and about that time.
That makes a lot of sense. The drop-in centers close at a certain time, so there's no place for you to go.
And the school buildings close after a certain time as well, right? So one less place.
The ones that are in school.
Yeah, yeah.
Because like if I go down on Broadway and 14th Street.
Right, a good chunk of them aren't in the school hours. Anybody have a proposal for alternate times that we should be looking at?
Hi, Kathy. I was just gonna say, so the youth I'm working with are going to be looking to be some of the peers participating in the point in time count. So from that perspective, a schedule that goes on until 10, depending on how they're supervised and whether they're with adult, it might be hard for them to be there that whole time. So just wanted to put that out there.
Got it. Philip, what do you think would be a more reasonable end time that might work better for those peers?
I would say maybe around like 8, and I'm hoping to get some contact so I can go back and forth checking in with them and staying in communication. But obviously they're going to be in school too, so after 4 is probably best, and then as long as they're supervised, then maybe till 8, but it does get dark pretty early. So if they're going to be out there on their own, I don't think that would be appropriate.
No, all of our teams, most all of our teams will have an adult lead in it, unless for some reason, we have maybe multiple youth teams that are kind of working different parts of a park, for example, one team over in this part of a park, one team over in this part of the park. But largely they are with an adult from a youth serving program, so that we're not just sending our youth out to the streets unaccompanied. Safety is our concern as well. We for sure do not want to ask people to do anything unsafe. All right, I've got a couple of other questions to kind of use you all, pick your brain here a little bit. When Peter was demonstrating the hotspot maps and wanting to hear from youth, particularly unsheltered youth or youth that perhaps fluctuate in and out of housing very quickly and spend some nights unsheltered, is there any other centralized meetings or gatherings that we could piggyback on to get some of those focus groups or some of that input? I thought perhaps, Hannah, you might know from All In's perspective, or even some of the YHDP planning efforts, if there are places that you feel like we should piggyback on or collaborate with as we're looking at building out our outreach areas where we will go to for the youth count. Are there any particular existing meetings that feel like it makes sense for us to collaborate with?
Existing meetings? I'm not sure. No, I don't. No, we don't have anything at that for YHCP at that time yet.
Okay. All right. I'm going to shift gears to our Come and Be Counted site for a moment here. These are a list of the sites that participated both in planning and our Come and Be Counted sites in 2019. On the actual sites that hosted teams, we had Beyond Emancipation. We had Covenant House, I believe, for their drop-in center, and for the drop-in center activities through Dreamcatcher and Yay. We had Family Violence Law Center, Missy, the Reach Ashland Youth Center, the UC Berkeley Suitcase Clinic, the Voices Youth Center, Yay, and Youth Uprising. Are there other places that you all think would be a great Come and Be Counted site? We certainly will add BYA to that group. Deidre has said that they would like to be included in that list as well, but are there others that we should be reaching out to that you're like, yes, these would be great Come and Be Counted sites that we should be aware of?
There's a Berkeley organization I know of called Youth Spirit Artworks, and they focus on art, but working with the homeless youth community.
Very familiar with them, and they have some tiny homes and other projects too. So perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
I was just going to propose. I don't know if it's possible at all, but would it be an idea to try to get a count of children at Camp Sweeney?
We are, through the federal regulations for the count, not allowed to count anybody, youth or adults, who are in any type of an institutional setting on the night of a count. Everything from jails, youth centers, hospitals, psychiatric facilities, nursing homes, those type of mental health treatment, John George, any of those people that are in those type of institutional settings cannot be counted or included in the youth count or in the adult count. It has to literally be people who were sleeping in a shelter, transitional housing program, hotel, motel with a program voucher, or were sleeping in a place not meant for human habitation, like a car, an encampment, a tent, on a park bench, on the BART train all night. So while we know this goes back to the issue that Peter talked about, the constraints around who we are required to count and required to not count, really contributes to giving us kind of a skewed picture of youth homelessness, because even if we knew that somebody had slept in a car before being in Camp Sweeney, we would not be able to count them.
Okay, thanks.
Any other drop-in centers or places where youth might go to hang out, or youth would go in to be warm if it's a cold or rainy type of day, that you feel like we should have a come and be counted materials
Alert from
available
backup
there?
not completed.
Nothing popping to mind? All right, well, we've added BYA, Youth Spirit Artworks to this existing list. We're going to continue to shop this list around. So if you are in any other meeting with me, you'll likely hear me ask about this even more, just because we're really trying to stretch that outreach as much as possible. If you think of anything else, drop it in the chat while we're still here, or you can certainly reach out to us afterwards and we'd be happy to include folks in. And then the last thing that I wanted to check in with all of you about really was thinking through what are the roles that each of you would like to be able to provide in the youth count. If you think that you would be amenable and open to recruiting youth to be our youth counters, our youth guides that get paid for their work to go out in those afternoon hours and administer the screening tool and fill out the count paperwork, that is one role. The second role is, as we just described, as a come and be counted site. And then the third role could be just being one of our youth count leads, where you or staff from your organization are the adults that are driving our youth guides out to the hotspot areas that we have identified from our homeless youth and from our youth providers. So those are the three roles, and we're trying to build our resource list and get a sense of what type of roles youth providers may like to play for the youth count. And so I'm going to type these into chat really quick and then ask you to put in, this is not a firm commitment, but to put in your ways in which you think your organization might be available to assist in the count. So first one, recruit youth guides. Second one, a come and be counted site. And then third, these are getting all spread out here. A youth, having youth leads that are essentially driving and supervising youth guides. Yes, Maureen, we definitely have Tri-Valley Haven on for our sheltered count. We would not miss you all, at least. Covenant House, guides and come and be counted sites. Thank you. Women's Daytime Drop-In Center as a place for come and be counted. Philip, thank you. OYAC, appreciate it. If some of you just aren't sure yet how to plug in, that's an acceptable answer as well. And we can, if you include your contact information, we'll be sure to, if you just say not sure yet and put your name, we'll be sure to follow up as well. Like I said, these are just preliminary. We're starting running our lists of things. So starting to build up our resource list. So any of that would be helpful. Good idea, Veronica. Oakland Unite, great opportunity potentially. Go ahead, Arlene.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was getting ready to type it. I didn't know it was open. Impact Hub has a youth portion. I think it's called Uproots. And I think they're in West Oakland, but they have a lot of reach.
We've also got Julie Burr from ASR is typing. I see her. I see that look of concentration on her face, so she captured it as well. Youth impact. Honestly, I'd say that is those kinds of places that are the more informal youth drop-in centers are probably more of the places that any leads that you have on that would be definitely appreciated.
Yeah, I know Roots or Uproots, a lot of youth pass through there. And I don't know what's on the West Oakland side. I don't know where these locations are all at.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about the West Oakland side, I see a lot of stuff in the East Oakland side. And maybe around the Fruitvale, somewhere there, maybe even towards downtown, but not deep in East West Oakland.
That's helpful. When you said Fruitvale, also made me think about other, other programs, just thinking about folks that serve Latinx youth and making sure that we're not overlooking that as well.
Yeah, like, I don't know who, the affiliation with like the Unity Council, those sort of programs that specifically serve certain, they might have access to places that are not mentioned, even the Pacific Islanders. If they have a place right down on International, I believe. And so I haven't heard anything specifically about them either.
Someone else was trying to jump in. Might have been Veronica.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I know that there are specific organizations working with either people who are being trafficked or are sex workers. And I think some of those folks are of the same age group, unfortunately. I can't remember the name, but I did have a friend who was supporting one of those organizations. I think it was kind of centered around Fruitvale.
That's pretty much Missy. One of the organizations I'm on the board, AC United. AC United kind of has a compilation of trafficking information. They have a dashboard that they set up. They're really generating some things. So that might be somebody you might be interested in contacting.
Perfect.
And it might be one step removed, but you might want to consider contacting APEB, AIDS Project of the East Bay, who may know of other organizations that could help.
We've got APEB, HEPAC, Casa Segura, kind of a few of those kind of places on our radar as well for that youth outreach intersection there. All right. Well, that is all of the content that we had for you all. Is there any other questions that you all have for us in terms of things that may not be clear about the youth count or other kinds of ideas or anything you want to ask while we're all together on the call?
Yeah, I put my email in the chat, but I'm gonna meet with my youth on Friday for the Youth Advisory Commission, and I'm hoping that some of them can participate and be peers and maybe even be led by me. So I guess just in the future, I'll put my email in there, so I'm, we'll be in contact. But I just want more information on what they do, what they will be doing, how it works, how I can get them in contact or have them apply, just stuff like that.
Thank you, Philip. You reminded me a critical point of clarification there. We will be starting formal outreach on that in January. Things are just a little too hectic with holidays and people's schedules that we feel like we have better outreach and recruitment efforts when we start after the new year. So we will start our youth guide recruitment in January. There will be job descriptions that are going out. So you'll have some printed materials that will be available for you to distribute out so that you have a better sense of what you're explaining to people and they can see something in writing before they agree. Following up on the conversation earlier from Deidre, we'll also have all of our Come and Be Counted site information available in January as well. We will have our screening tool finalized by then. And so a lot of this really up until December is just a lot of information gathering. And then in January is when you'll start to see more of it funneling outward. This is our last meeting like this that we will be having, where we are just gathering together community to talk about and process some of the topics. In the next phase of work that, as I said, we'll pick up again in January after the holidays, we will be doing a lot more one-on-one level communication. So we'll be reaching out to you directly, Philip. We'll be reaching out to you directly, Deidre. We'll be reaching out to Youth Spirit Artworks, Covenant House, all of those other organizations and handling it more in communication and email and phone and one-on-one so that we can really help answer all of your questions and get all of that targeted communication so you know what's going on and you know how you can plug in. And we're probably all kind of sick of these little Zoom meetings. All right. Any last call? Anybody else have anything they want to talk about on youth count stuff? All right, well, I will stay on, Julie will stay on as well, and Katie also will keep the Zoom option open a little bit longer if there are folks that do want to stay on and ask questions, but otherwise just want to wish you all very, very happy holidays, whatever it is you are celebrating, and enjoy all of that time. Thank you for plugging in with us on this really busy time, kind of pre-holiday. We know that you all are dealing with a lot and got a lot on your plate. So we just really appreciate your time and expertise being shared with us in this forum today. So thank you all. Have a great day. Happy holidays, and we'll see you in the new year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank